YouTube, I'm back with another video, and today I'm going to be saying Mr. Beast 202 times now. I got this from Jam Kura because I said PewDiePie 100 times. And then he was thinking, oh, I'm going to do Mr. Beast. And then, I was like, okay, I'm going to beat the record for 101. And then now he's going to say 200, and then I have to be 201. But no disrespect to the man, I'm actually friends with him. I already subscribed to him. I already did everything. I've been friends with him at school since we were in 1st grade. So let's get on with the video. In 3, and no disrespect. In 3, 2, 1. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Ow. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Give me the hiccup. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. 151 left. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, 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 160. Mr. Beast, 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 80. Mr. Beast, 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 90. Mr. Beast, 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 Beast, 100. Now, I'll be back in a minute. I gotta go do something. Okay, I am back. Let's get started again. Well, alright, I'm not gonna restart. Anyway, let's go. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. 20 times already. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Subscribe to PewDiePie. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. 160 right now, maybe? No. Mr. Beast, 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 180. Mr. Beast, 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 180. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Last one. Subscribe to PewDiePie, Mr. Beast. Well, that's going to be it for the video. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. Put the notifications on and then tell me that you did in the comments. But if you are T-Series, I will not subscribe to your YouTube channel. And remember, guys, no disrespect to Jam Kura. I have no disrespect. The dude is awesome. Peace.